The Hawaiian sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples as Michael Thompson stood on the balcony of their oceanfront suite, adjusting his tie for the third time. At 28, he was the picture of success, a rising corporate lawyer from Chicago with perfectly styled dark hair, a confident smile, and a future that seemed carved in stone. Today was supposed to be the culmination of everything he'd worked for, his wedding day. "Michael, you look nervous," his best man, David, said, stepping onto the balcony with 2 glasses of champagne. "Sarah's going to be beautiful, man. You've got nothing to worry about." Michael accepted the glass, but barely sipped it. "I'm not nervous about Sarah. She's perfect. I just want everything to go exactly as planned." And it had. The ceremony at the Maui Grand Resort had been flawless. Sarah, radiant in her flowing white dress, had walked down the aisle like something out of a fairy tale. Her blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her blue eyes sparkled with tears of joy as she said her vows. Michael's mother had cried. His father had given him that rare approving nod, and even Sarah's somewhat distant parents had seemed genuinely happy. "Do you, Michael James Thompson, take Sarah Elizabeth Morgan to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness, and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" "I do," Michael had said, his voice steady and sure. Now, 3 hours later, the reception was winding down. The last of the guests were filtering out, leaving behind the remnants of what everyone agreed was a perfect wedding. Michael loosened his tie and found Sarah sitting alone at their sweetheart table, staring out at the ocean. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "How does it feel?" Sarah smiled, but something flickered in her eyes, just for a moment. "It feels ... surreal, like I'm living someone else's life." Michael laughed. "Well, it's your life now. Our life." "Yes," Sarah whispered, squeezing his hand. "Our life." Later that evening, as they walked along the moonlit beach, Sarah was quieter than usual. Michael attributed it to exhaustion. Planning. A wedding was stressful, and Sarah had been particularly anxious about every detail. She'd always been a perfectionist, which was one of the things that had drawn him to her when they met at a law firm mixer 2 years ago. "Are you happy?" Michael asked, stopping to face her as the waves lapped at their feet. Sarah looked up at him, her expression unreadable in the moonlight. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said. It wasn't quite an answer, but Michael was too caught up in the romance of the moment to press further. They were married now, starting their life together in paradise. What more could he ask for? Back in their suite, as Sarah disappeared into the bathroom to change, Michael noticed her purse had fallen over, its contents spilling across the marble floor. He knelt to gather everything up: lipstick, keys, her phone, and a small, worn piece of paper that had been folded and refolded so many times it was beginning to tear along the creases. Michael hesitated. He'd never been the type to snoop, but something about the paper's condition suggested it was important to Sarah. Very important. Without thinking, he unfolded it. It was a handwritten note, and the words made his blood run cold. "Sarah, I know you're getting married tomorrow, but I can't let you go through with this without telling you the truth. Michael deserves to know who you really are. If you don't tell him, I will. You have until your honeymoon is over." Michael's hands trembled as he read it again and again. The handwriting was masculine, confident. The tone was threatening, but also ... familiar somehow. Like whoever wrote it knew Sarah intimately. "Michael, are you okay out there?" Sarah's voice from the bathroom made him jump. Quickly, he refolded the note and slipped it into his pocket, his mind racing. Who was Jay? What truth was Sarah hiding? And why did the handwriting look so familiar? "Yeah, I'm fine," he called back, his voice betraying nothing, just admiring the view. But as he stood there in their honeymoon suite, surrounded by the remnants of their perfect wedding day, Michael realized that the view had suddenly become very different indeed. The woman he'd just married, the woman he thought he knew better than anyone, was apparently harboring a secret so significant that someone felt compelled to threaten her about it. As Sarah emerged from the bathroom in her silk nightgown, smiling, that same beautiful smile that had captivated him from the moment they met, Michael felt something shift inside him. For the first time in their relationship, he looked at his new wife and wondered, "Who are you really?" The note burned in his pocket like a brand, and Michael knew that their honeymoon, their marriage, would never be the same. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, matching Michael's mood perfectly. He'd barely slept, the mysterious note playing on repeat in his mind. Every time he'd started to drift off, he'd felt the paper crinkle in his pajama pocket, reminding him that his perfect life might be built on a lie. Sarah was already awake when he opened his eyes, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, staring out at the churning ocean. She looked troubled, and for a moment, Michael wondered if she was going to confess whatever secret she was hiding. "The weather's not looking great for our snorkeling trip," she said without turning around. "Maybe that's for the best," Michael replied, sitting up. "We could stay in, talk, get to know each other better." Sarah's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. "We've been together for 2 years, Michael. What's left to know?" "Everything, apparently," Michael thought, but he said, "I don't know. Tell me about your childhood, your family." "We've always been so focused on the future, we never really talked about the past." Now Sarah did turn around, and Michael saw something flash in her eyes. Panic? Fear? "My past is boring. You know that. Small town, ordinary family. Nothing worth discussing." But Michael had learned to read people in his legal career, and Sarah was lying. The question was why. "Sarah, is there anything you want to tell me? Anything at all?" She set down her coffee cup with a sharp clink. "Why are you asking me that?" "I just ... I want us to be completely honest with each other. No secrets." Sarah laughed, but it sounded forced. "Michael, you're being paranoid. It's normal to feel overwhelmed after a wedding. We're fine." She came over and kissed his forehead, but Michael noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "I'm going to take a shower. Why don't you order room service?" As soon as the bathroom door closed, Michael pulled out the note and read it again. "Michael deserves to know who you really are." The words seemed to mock him. He'd always prided himself on being perceptive, on reading people correctly. How had he missed something so significant about the woman he'd just married? He found himself staring at the handwriting again. There was something nagging at him about it, something familiar. On impulse, he grabbed Sarah's purse and started looking through it more carefully. Credit cards, driver's license, insurance cards, ... and then he found it. A business card tucked behind her credit cards. James Mitchell, private investigator. The handwriting on the card matched the note perfectly. Michael's heart hammered as he processed this information. Sarah had been in contact with a private investigator, the same private investigator who had threatened to expose her secret. But why would she hire someone to investigate herself? Unless ... unless she hadn't hired him. Unless someone else had. The shower was still running, so Michael quickly searched the rest of Sarah's belongings. In her jewelry case, hidden beneath a false bottom, he found a small manila envelope. Inside were photographs, surveillance photos, by the look of them. Photos of Sarah ... with another man. Michael's world tilted. The photos showed Sarah embracing a tall, dark-haired man outside what looked like a motel. The timestamp showed they were taken 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks before their wedding. The man's face was partially obscured, but his build was familiar. Very familiar. Michael's hands shook as he looked at the next photo. This one showed Sarah and the man kissing passionately in what appeared to be a parking garage. The man's face was clearer in this shot, and Michael's blood turned to ice. It was David, his best man. His best friend since college. The shower shut off, and Michael quickly shoved everything back where he'd found it. By the time Sarah emerged, he was sitting calmly on the bed, but inside he was screaming. "Feel better?" he asked, his voice amazingly steady. "Much," Sarah said, but she was watching him carefully. "You look pale. Are you feeling all right?" "Just tired," Michael lied. "Hey, have you heard from David since yesterday?" "I wanted to thank him for the speech." Sarah's face went completely white. "David? No. Why would I have heard from David?" "No?" "Reason. Just thought he might have called to see how we're doing." "We should probably give him some space," Sarah said quickly. "Let him get back to his own life." Michael nodded, but inside he was putting the pieces together. The note had said Sarah had until the honeymoon was over, which meant whatever was happening, it was going to come to a head soon. That afternoon, they went through the motions of being happy honeymooners. They had lunch at a beachside restaurant, walked through the hotel gardens, and took pictures by the pool. But Michael felt like he was watching it all from outside his body. Every smile Sarah gave him felt like a lie. Every "I love you" felt like a betrayal. As they sat by the pool, Sarah excused herself to go to the bathroom. The moment she was gone, Michael called David. "Michael, how's married life treating you?" David's voice was too cheerful, too forced. "David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." There was a long pause. "Okay. Are you having an affair with my wife?" The silence stretched so long that Michael thought the call had dropped. Then David spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Michael, God, I never wanted this to happen." The confirmation hit Michael like a physical blow. "How long? 6 months? Maybe longer. I don't know. It just it happened." "It happened? It happened." Michael's voice rose, and other guests at the pool started to look over. He lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. "You don't just happen to sleep with your best friend's fiancée, David. I know, and I'm sorry. I've been trying to get her to tell you, but she said she was going to end it with me after the wedding." "She said she chose you? Chose me?" Michael felt sick. "Like I'm some kind of consolation prize? That's not." "Michael, she does love you. In her own way. Her own way." Michael wanted to throw the phone into the pool. What the hell does that mean? It means she loves the life you can give her, the stability, the future. She loves the idea of being married to you. But not me. I don't know. Maybe. I think she's confused about what she wants." Michael hung up without another word. He sat there by the pool, watching the other couples laugh and swim and enjoy their vacations, and realized that his entire life had been a lie. The woman he'd married was in love with someone else. His best friend had betrayed him, and he was trapped in paradise with both of these revelations. When Sarah returned, she found him staring out at the ocean. "Michael, you look like you've seen a ghost." He turned to look at her, really look at her, and realized that in a way he had. The woman he thought he'd married didn't exist. She was a ghost, a beautiful illusion that had just been shattered. "Sarah," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Sarah's face went pale as she sat down across from Michael. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pool deck, and the cheerful sounds of other vacationers felt like a cruel mockery of the conversation they were about to have. "Michael, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" Michael pulled out the note and placed it on the table between them. Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized it, and her hand instinctively moved to her purse. "I found this when your purse fell over last night," Michael said, his voice eerily calm, "along with some very interesting photographs." Sarah's composure cracked completely. Her hands began to shake, and tears welled up in her eyes. "Michael, I can explain. Can you?" "Because I just got off the phone with David, and he explained quite a bit already." Sarah buried her face in her hands. Oh, God, I never wanted you to find out this way." "What way did you want me to find out? On our first anniversary? Our 10th? Or were you planning to take this secret to your grave?" "I don't know." Sarah's voice broke. "I didn't plan any of this. It just happened, and then it got complicated, and then it was too late to stop it." "Too late?" "Sarah, you could have stopped it at any point. You could have been honest with me. You could have called off the wedding and throw away everything we've built together. Michael, you don't understand. This isn't just about us anymore. There are other people involved." Michael leaned back in his chair, studying his wife's face. "What other people?" Sarah wiped her eyes and looked around nervously. "Can we go back to the room? I can't do this here." Back in their suite, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed while Michael paced by the window. The silence stretched between them, until finally Sarah spoke. "I didn't mean for it to happen with David. You have to believe that. We were working on your surprise bachelor party, and we were spending a lot of time together. And one night we kissed, and then it became more. 6 months, Sarah. This wasn't some momentary lapse in judgment. This was a relationship." "Yes," she whispered. "It was. Do you love him?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. "Then why did you marry me?" Sarah looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd known her, Michael saw something that might have been genuine emotion in her eyes. "Because I love you too. Just ... differently." "What does that mean?" "It means David makes me feel alive. When I'm with him, I feel like I'm the person I was meant to be. But you ... double quotes, searching for words. You make me feel safe, secure. With you, I can have the life I always dreamed of." Michael sat down heavily in the chair across from her. "So you chose security over love." "I chose both. I thought I could have both. David understood that you could give me things he couldn't. A future, stability, children. Michael's voice rose. "Were you planning to have children with me while continuing to sleep with David?" "No, I was going to end it with him. I swear to you, I was going to end it." "When? After the honeymoon?" "I was going to tell him it was over, and that we could never see each other again." Michael laughed bitterly. "How convenient. And what about the private investigator? James Mitchell?" Sarah's eyes widened. "How do you know about him?" "His business card was in your purse. He's the one who wrote the note, isn't he?" Sarah nodded miserably. "David hired him. He was trying to force me to tell you the truth." "David hired him? Why?" "Because he's in love with me. Really in love. He wants me to leave you and be with him." Michael felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. "So let me get this straight. You're having an affair with my best friend, who's so in love with you that he hired a private investigator to threaten you into leaving me. And you married me anyway. I know how it sounds. It sounds like I'm the biggest fool who ever lived." Sarah stood up and moved toward him. "Michael, please. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I do love you. In my own way, I do. Stop saying that." Michael shouted, standing up so quickly that Sarah stepped back. "Stop saying you love me in your own way. Either you love me or you don't. Either you want to be married to me or you don't. There's no middle ground here, Sarah. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. You chose to have an affair. You chose to lie to me. You chose to marry me while you are in love with someone else. Those were all choices, Sarah. Your choices. Sarah sank back down on the bed, crying openly now. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Michael looked at her sitting there, and for a moment he almost felt sorry for her. She looked so small and broken. But then he remembered the photographs, the lies, the months of deception, and his sympathy evaporated. I need to know something, he said quietly, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you pregnant? Sarah's head snapped up. What? Are you pregnant? Because if you are, I need to know if the baby is mine. Michael, no, I'm not pregnant. And if I were, it would be yours. David and I, we were always careful. Always careful. How thoughtful of you. Michael, please. Tell me what you want me to do. Tell me how to fix this. Michael stared at her for a long moment. I want you to be honest with me. For once in our relationship, I want complete honesty. Do you want to be married to me? Sarah's answer came without hesitation. Yes. Even though you love David? Yes. Why? Because love isn't enough. I learned that the hard way. Love doesn't pay the bills or provide security or give you the life you want. You can give me all of that. So you're willing to live a lie for the rest of your life? If it means I can have you, yes. Michael walked to the window and looked out at the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant reds and golds. It should have been beautiful, but all he could think about was how different this sunset was from the one he'd watched yesterday. Yesterday, he'd been a man in love, looking forward to a lifetime of happiness. Today, he was a man who discovered that his entire relationship was built on deception. I can't do this, he said finally. Michael, please. I can't live with someone who loves another man. I can't wake up every morning wondering if you're thinking about David. I can't have children with someone who chose me because I was the safe option. Then what do you want to do? Michael turned back to face her. I want to go home. I want to annul this marriage. And I want you to be with the person you actually love. Sarah's face crumpled. You're throwing away everything we've built together. No, Sarah. You already threw it away. I'm just acknowledging that it's gone. As they sat there in the gathering darkness, Michael realized that his honeymoon had indeed revealed a shocking truth. But it wasn't just about Sarah's affair or David's betrayal. It was about himself. It was about the kind of man he was and the kind of life he wanted to live. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that he couldn't live a lie. The next morning, Michael woke up alone. Sarah had spent the night on the couch, and when he emerged from the bedroom, she was already dressed and sitting by the window with her suitcase packed. I called the airline, she said without looking at him. I can get a flight back to Chicago this afternoon. Michael poured himself coffee with shaking hands. He hadn't slept more than an hour, and his mind felt foggy and surreal. What about David? I called him too. I told him it was over between us. Because I found out, or because you actually want it to be over? Sarah finally looked at him, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Does it matter? It matters to me, because you found out. If you hadn't found out, I would have tried to make it work with both of you. I know that makes me a terrible person, but it's the truth. Michael sat down across from her. Thank you for being honest, finally. Michael, I know you hate me right now. I don't hate you. I'm angry and hurt and confused, but I don't hate you. Then why can't we work through this? People survive affairs all the time. We could go to counseling, rebuild trust, because this wasn't just an affair, Sarah. This was our entire relationship. Everything I thought I knew about you was a lie. The woman I fell in love with doesn't exist. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. She exists. She's just complicated. She's in love with another man. That's not complicated. That's disqualifying. After Sarah left for the airport, Michael found himself alone in paradise, and it felt like the loneliest place on earth. He walked the beach, sat by the pool, and tried to make sense of what had happened to his life. 2 days ago, he'd been a happily married man. Now he was a soon-to-be divorced man who'd lost his wife and his best friend in one fell swoop. He tried calling his parents, but couldn't bring himself to explain what had happened. He tried reading, but couldn't focus. He tried drinking, but it only made him feel worse. Finally, as the sun was setting on his third day alone, he found himself in the hotel chapel. Michael hadn't been to church since he was a child. His parents had dragged him to Christmas and Easter services, but religion had never been a significant part of his life. He'd always believed in God in an abstract way, but he'd never felt the need for a personal relationship with the divine. Now, sitting in the quiet chapel with its simple wooden cross and stained glass windows, Michael felt utterly lost. The man he'd been 3 days ago had been confident, successful, and secure in his identity. That man was gone, and Michael had no idea who he was supposed to be now. "God," he whispered, feeling foolish but desperate. "I don't know how to pray. I don't know what to ask for. I just ... I don't know what to do." The chapel was silent, except for the distant sound of waves. Michael sat there for a long time, waiting for something. A sign, a voice, a feeling of peace. Nothing came. He was about to leave when an elderly Hawaiian man entered the chapel. He moved slowly, his weathered hands gripping a walking cane, and he nodded politely to Michael before taking a seat in the front pew. "Excuse me," the man said after a few minutes. "I don't mean to intrude, but you look like a man carrying a heavy burden." Michael looked up, surprised. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb your prayers." "You're not disturbing anything. I'm Pastor Keone. I help take care of this chapel. And sometimes I help take care of the people who find their way here." "I'm not really religious," Michael said. "Neither are most of the people who end up here," Pastor Keone said with a gentle smile. "But sometimes life has a way of bringing us to places we never expected to be." Michael found himself telling the pastor everything. About Sarah, about David, about the lies and the betrayal, and the complete destruction of everything he'd thought his life was going to be. Pastor Keone listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making soft sounds of understanding. "So now I don't know who I am," Michael concluded. "I don't know what I want, or what I'm supposed to do with my life. I feel like I'm floating in space with no anchor." Pastor Keone was quiet for a long minute. "Can I tell you something about anchors, son?" "Sure. An anchor is only as good as what it's attached to. If you anchor your boat to a piece of driftwood, you're going to drift away. But if you anchor it to solid rock, you'll stay put even in the strongest storm. What does that have to do with me? You anchored your life to another person, to Sarah, to your idea of what your marriage would be. But people are like driftwood. They move, they change, they break. If you want to stop drifting, you need to anchor yourself to something solid. Like what? Like truth, like integrity, like your relationship with God." Michael shook his head. "I don't have a relationship with God." "You're talking to him, right? Now, aren't you?" Michael looked around the chapel, then back at the pastor. "I guess I am. The thing about God is, he's not impressed by our successes or our failures. He's not going to love you less because your wife had an affair or because your best friend betrayed you. He loves you because you're his child. Period. But I don't know how to be his child. I don't know how to have faith or believe in something I can't see. Faith isn't about having all the answers, son. It's about being willing to keep walking, even when you can't see where the path leads. I don't know where my path leads anymore. That's the beauty of it. You get to choose." You can choose to be bitter and angry and closed off from the world. Or you can choose to use this experience to become a better man. A man who values honesty over convenience, truth over comfort. Michael sat in silence, processing the pastor's words. How do I do that? You start by forgiving them. Forgive them? They destroyed my life. They destroyed the life you thought you were going to have. But maybe that life wasn't as solid as you thought it was. Maybe this is an opportunity to build something better. I don't know how to forgive them. I don't know how to forgive myself for being so blind. Forgiveness isn't a feeling, son. It's a choice. You choose to forgive because holding on to anger will poison your soul. You choose to forgive because it's the right thing to do, not because they deserve it. And then what? Then you figure out what kind of man you want to be, what kind of life you want to build, and you start building it, one day at a time. Michael left the chapel as the sun was setting, feeling something he hadn't felt in days. Hope. Not hope that his marriage could be saved or that his old life could be restored, but hope that maybe, just maybe, he could build something new, something better, something anchored to solid rock instead of driftwood. That night, for the first time since discovering Sarah's affair, Michael slept peacefully. And in his dreams, he heard a voice, not audible, but somehow real, saying, I will make something beautiful from these broken pieces. 6 months later, Michael stood in his new apartment in Seattle, looking out at the Puget Sound as the morning sun reflected off the water. The view was nothing like the one from his old Chicago high-rise, but it felt like home in a way that place never had. He'd left Chicago 3 months after returning from Hawaii. After the annulment was finalized and the divorce from his old life was complete, the law firm had been understanding, even offering him a position in their Seattle office. It was a step down from his previous role, but Michael found he cared less about prestige and more about peace these days. The phone rang, interrupting his morning meditation. David's name appeared on the screen. Michael hesitated, then answered. Hello, David. Michael. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. I almost didn't. Michael sat down in his reading chair, a well-worn leather piece he'd bought at a thrift store. How are you? Honestly, I'm terrible. Sarah and I tried to make it work, but double quotes. But she doesn't love me the way she loved the idea of being married to you. And I don't love who I became when I was with her. Michael was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Are you? Really? Yes. I know that probably sounds crazy, but I am. I don't want either of you to be miserable. Michael, I need to tell you something. About the investigation, about the photos. David, we don't need to. Yes, we do. I didn't hire that private investigator to force Sarah to tell you the truth. I hired him to find out if you were cheating on her. Michael's hand tightened. On the phone. What? I was so guilt-ridden about the affair that I convinced myself you must be doing something wrong too. I thought if I could prove you were unfaithful, it would justify what we were doing. But I wasn't. No, you weren't. You were completely faithful, completely committed, completely in love with your wife. And I was so jealous of that, so angry that she chose you over me, that I hired someone to try to destroy you. Michael felt a familiar surge of anger, but it was tempered by something else. Pity. David, why are you telling me this? Because I got sober, 30 days clean, and part of the program is making amends to the people you've hurt. I hurt you more than I hurt anyone. Yes, you did. I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough. I know I destroyed our friendship and probably traumatized you in ways I don't even understand. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the affair. I'm sorry for the lies. And I'm sorry for trying to make you the villain in a story where I was the one who chose to be the bad guy. Michael looked out at the water, watching a ferry make its way across the Sound. I forgive you, David. You what? I forgive you. I forgave you months ago, actually. Not because you deserved it, but because I couldn't move forward while I was carrying all that anger around. David was quiet for a long moment. How do you do that? How do you forgive someone who betrayed you so completely? I had help. I've been going to church, working with a counselor, trying to figure out how to build a life based on something more solid than just my own desires and ambitions. Church? You? Michael laughed. I know, right? Turns out that when your whole world falls apart, you start looking for something that can't be destroyed by other people's choices. And you found it? I'm finding it. Every day. It's not easy, and I'm not perfect at it, but I'm learning what it means to anchor your life to something eternal instead of something temporary. I don't know how to do that. You start by being honest with yourself, with God, with the people you've hurt. You already started that process by calling me. What's next? That's up to you. But if you want some advice, find a good counselor. Find a church community. Find something bigger than yourself to serve. And be patient with yourself. Healing takes time. After David hung up, Michael sat in his chair for a long time, thinking about the conversation. 6 months ago, he would have hung up on David or told him exactly what he thought of him. But the man he was becoming was different from the man he'd been. More forgiving, more at peace, more anchored to something that couldn't be shaken by other people's choices. He'd started attending a small church in his neighborhood, not because he'd had some traumatic conversion experience, but because he'd found a community of people who were trying to live by principles that made sense to him. The pastor, a young woman named Rebecca, had helped him understand that faith wasn't about having all the answers, but about being willing to keep walking, even when the path was unclear. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from his sister in Portland. Still coming for dinner Sunday? The kids are excited to see Uncle Michael. He smiled as he typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Family had become more important to him since the divorce. He'd realized that he'd been so focused on building a perfect life with Sarah that he'd neglected the relationships that had always been there for him. His parents, his sister, his nephew and niece. These people loved him, not because of what he could provide, but because of who he was. At work, Michael had found a new sense of purpose. Instead of focusing on corporate law, he'd started doing more pro bono work, helping people who couldn't afford legal representation. It paid less, but it felt more meaningful. He was using his skills to help people instead of just to advance his career. And slowly, carefully, he'd started dating again. Not seriously, and not with any desperate need to replace what he'd lost, but with an openness to the possibility that someday he might find someone who would love him for who he truly was, not for what he could provide. That evening, Michael attended his weekly Bible study group. It was a small group of people, mostly his age, who met at the church to discuss faith and life and how to live with integrity in a complicated world. How are you doing, Michael? Asked Jennifer, a teacher, who'd been divorced 3 years earlier. The group had become like family to him, a safe space where he could be honest about his struggles and his growth. I'm doing well, Michael said, and realized he meant it. David called me today. The group knew his story. He'd shared it gradually, over the months, finding healing in the telling of it. They'd walked with him through the anger, the grief, the slow process of forgiveness. How did that go? Asked Tom, a veteran who'd found faith after struggling with PTSD. Better than I expected. He's in recovery, making amends. I was able to forgive him genuinely, not just say the words. That's huge, said Pastor Rebecca. 6 months ago, you could barely say his name without anger. I know. And I realize now that the anger was hurting me more than it was hurting him. When I finally let it go, I felt ... lighter, free. Forgiveness is like that, said Margaret, an elderly woman who'd lost her husband to cancer. It's not about them deserving it. It's about us deserving peace. As the group discussed that evening's passage about redemption and second chances, Michael reflected on how much his life had changed. The man who'd gotten married in Hawaii 6 months ago had been successful but shallow, confident but fragile. He'd built his entire identity around external things, his career, his relationship, his image. The man sitting in this circle of imperfect people seeking truth was different. He was still successful, but success no longer defined him. He was still confident, but his confidence came from something deeper than his achievements. He'd learned that true strength came not from never being broken, but from allowing yourself to be rebuilt on a stronger foundation. After the group ended, Michael walked home through the quiet Seattle streets. The city felt alive around him, full of people with their own stories of heartbreak and healing, loss and redemption. He no longer felt like he was the only person who'd ever been betrayed or disappointed. He was part of the human family, sharing in the universal experience of suffering and growth. Back in his apartment, Michael sat down at his desk and opened his laptop. He'd been working on something for weeks, a letter he wasn't sure he'd ever send. Dear Sarah, I've started this letter a dozen times, and I'm not sure I'll have the courage to send it this time either. But I need to try. I want you to know that I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because carrying anger toward you was poisoning my soul. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about you deserving it. It's about me deserving peace. I don't know if you and David are still together, and honestly, it doesn't matter to me anymore. What matters is that you find genuine happiness, not just security or comfort, but real joy. You deserve that, even if our marriage couldn't provide it. I've been thinking a lot about why our relationship failed, and I realize now that I was just as responsible as you were. Not for the affair, that was your choice, but for building a relationship that was more about appearances than authenticity. I was so focused on having the perfect life that I forgot to build a real one. I want you to know that I'm okay. More than okay, actually. I'm learning what it means to be truly content, not because my circumstances are perfect, but because I'm anchored to something that can't be shaken by other people's choices. I hope you're finding your way to the same kind of peace. I hope you're learning to love yourself enough to be honest about what you really want. And I hope you're finding the courage to build a life based on truth instead of fear. I wish you well, Sarah. I really do. Michael. He read the letter 3 times, then saved it to his drafts folder. Maybe he'd send it someday. Maybe he wouldn't. But writing it had been healing. Another step in the process of letting go. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from his sister. Mom called. She's proud of how you've handled everything. We all are. He smiled as he typed back, thanks. I'm proud of who I'm becoming too. As he prepared for bed, Michael found himself thinking about the dream he'd had in Hawaii, a voice that had promised to make something beautiful from broken pieces. At the time, he dismissed it as wishful thinking, the product of a traumatized mind looking for hope. But now, looking back over the past 6 months, he could see that the promise had been kept. Not in the way he'd expected. His marriage wasn't restored. His friendship with David wasn't renewed. But something beautiful had emerged from the wreckage of his old life. He'd discovered strength he didn't know he possessed. He'd learned to forgive when forgiveness seemed impossible. He'd found a community of people who accepted him as he was, not as he pretended to be. He'd developed a relationship with God that gave his life meaning beyond his own desires and ambitions. Most importantly, he'd learned that happiness didn't come from having perfect circumstances, but from having the right response to imperfect ones. He'd learned that true success wasn't about avoiding failure, but about finding the courage to rebuild when everything fell apart. Michael knelt beside his bed, a habit he'd developed over the past few months. His prayers were simple, honest conversations with God about his day, his struggles, his hopes. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness, "for the pain that led to healing, for the betrayal that led to freedom, for the death of my old life that made room for this new one. Help me to keep growing, keep forgiving, keep becoming the man you created me to be." As he drifted off to sleep, Michael felt a deep sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to choose love over fear, truth over comfort, forgiveness over resentment. But tonight, he was exactly where he needed to be. Shocking discovery he'd made on his honeymoon hadn't destroyed his life after all. It had destroyed his illusions, shattered his false securities, and forced him to confront the difference between the life he'd thought he wanted and the life he actually needed. And in the end, that destruction had been the beginning of something beautiful, something real, something anchored to solid rock instead of shifting sand. Michael smiled as sleep took him, knowing that the best parts of his story were still to be written. And for the first time in his life, he was excited to see what tomorrow would bring. The end.